Houston was never really going to win a championship with Harden. I think that was pretty evident after the Rockets choked in the conference finals. So, for those of you still saying they should have tried to hold on to Harden, like, why are you going to try and keep somebody who is being a nuisance to the locker room? DeMarcus Cousins looked like he was about to fight James Harden by himself, so maybe for James Harden's personal safety, you want to move him out of the locker room into a different team entirely, but, Houston was never going to win a championship with Harden, so why would you go through the trouble to keep somebody who wasn't going to win a championship with you and was only going to make the locker room worse than it already was? And for all of those reasons, I think that the Houston Rockets won this trade. It's hard to look at this and say, how can you think the Nets lost this trade? I mean, they're more than likely going to win multiple championships, or at least one championship this year or the next year. But the more and more I think about it, the more and more I feel in the bottom of my heart that the Rockets actually won this trade. In the first real move as Rockets general manager, Rafael Stone hit an absolute home run, in my opinion. And you may say, well, Stone chose draft picks, which equate to nameless faces, over Ben Simmons, who is a perennial all-star at his position and is already a pretty realized talent. And, of course, that's not for sure. That's just what's reported that the 76ers were offering was Ben Simmons. And some people are suggesting that the trade didn't go through because of the fact that Daryl Morey was now the 76ers general manager after he resigned to supposedly spend time with his family on the Eastern Coast since his son was graduating high school, but then he popped up as the 76ers general manager. So some people are suggesting, Terry Fertitta and Rafael Stone are a little bit heartbroken and bitter about that, and they didn't want to deal Harden to the 76ers for that reason. But I don't really think that's it. I think the philosophy of this entire trade was options and cap space, and it wouldn't make sense to drop your max contract player, trade him to another team, just to pick up another max contract player who I believe the contract is actually very similar in terms of price as well. So it would make no sense if your philosophy with this trade is cap space and options. It would make no sense to send your max contract player to get a max contract player. And not only that, but a max contract player that does not fit your offensive philosophy at all in the middle of the season. If you were doing this in the offseason where you had time to match players easily in the free agency market to build around somebody like Ben Simmons, then sure, that would be a little bit more reasonable. But to do it in the middle of the season, 9 games into the season, and to try and bring in another max player, which will put you in a very similar spot with the cap space, with your cap room, and have that player more than likely not be not be happy that he got taken from a potentially a team that would come out of the East in the 76ers and get put on a team that is not really going to probably go anywhere this season. I still think that the Rockets are a playoff team, but they're not going to come out of the West. I would be very surprised if that ended up happening. So it makes no sense to bring in Ben Simmons. You'd be in a similar place with your cap space. You wouldn't want to be there. And the offense in Houston is not catered to Ben Simmons at all. It would just be a mess. It would take way too long for the Rockets to get anything together. And quite honestly, I don't really think that anybody wants Ben Simmons apart from the 76ers. You take a look at what the type of league this league is. It's purely about scoring in this league right now. And sure, Ben Simmons can get his, and he does get his, but he still does not have a jump shot. And his unwillingness to really develop a jump shot is probably something that I think scares away a lot of owners and a lot of general managers in this league. But yeah, I don't think that Simmons would have been the right choice, especially with the philosophy it looked like the Rockets were going for when trading James Harden. It's not that Simmons can't score. It's not that he's not a perennial all-star at his position. It's just not a good fit for the Rockets currently, so why try and get a max contract player that A, won't fit the team, B, you would have to build around in later seasons, and C, can't shoot a basketball. So in that aspect, Victor Oladipo is a better fit, and he is on an expiring contract, as we've said. So if he doesn't end up liking Houston or is a bad fit for the team, you can move him before the deadline, or at the very least, you have him leave at the end of the season, and no harm, no foul. But Victor Oladipo is a talented player when healthy, so I think that is a better fit for what the Rockets are trying to do. And above all else, the Rockets basically have the world as their oyster right now in terms of cap space and draft picks. I kind of equate it to what's going on in Jacksonville right now in the NFL. They have a new coach, they have all these draft picks, they have tons of cap space. And most importantly, and this one thing in particular is why I think the Rockets won this trade, they have options. Like, lots of options. You know, people are really focusing on the draft picks and saying, well, you traded James Harden, a for sure talent, perennial MVP and all-star, to the Brooklyn Nets for draft picks, which essentially relate to nameless faces. And, well, yes, in some part that's true. You don't know the talent that you're going to be getting out of the draft. Although this draft in 2021 is supposed to be really, really good, draft picks don't always equal drafted players. And what I mean by that is that draft picks also serve, as we see in plenty of trades, draft picks also serve as trade bait. So you have all these first round picks, so it doesn't necessarily mean that the Rockets are going to use all of those undrafted players. It could be a similar situation like Boston used it with Brooklyn's pick, with the one of Brooklyn's first round picks with the Garnett and Paul Pierce trade to get Kyrie Irving. You know, these first round picks end up equaling drafted players, but not necessarily for you. You can use these draft picks to go and get yourself a player with a trade. And that also, just having all these draft picks makes your team a little bit more attractive in free agency. So I'm taking a look at the Rockets and I'm saying, you have all this cap room, you have all these draft picks, and Kawhi Leonard is a free agent next year. And hey, if things go south in LA like they have the potential to do, you know, Kawhi might find himself wanting out of LA and heading back to Texas, you know? So definitely the Nets are going to win a championship. I think it would be probably one of the biggest turnarounds in sports history, or one of the biggest busts rather, if they didn't win a championship. But in terms of what the meaning of this trade is, I think the Rockets won this trade. They got rid of their disgruntled superstar that was only going to muddy their locker room and their franchise further. They got back 8 first-round draft picks, which not only can be used on drafting really good talent, but also can be used as trade bait in trading for other players. And they were able to minimize their cap space by flipping LeVert for Oladipo, who's going to be a similar talent, or at least a similar level talent, assuming that all of them stay healthy, and Oladipo is not going to give you the subsequent cap hits that LeVert would, considering that LeVert just signed a brand new contract. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching this segment from the Hard-Headed Sports Podcast. If you're interested in watching more highlights from the show as they come out after the show's completion, you should definitely hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell to turn on those notifications so you never miss an upload. If you're interested in listening to the whole show in its entirety, you can listen to the show on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Anchor. Again, thank you so much for watching the show. I hope you have an incredible day, and I will see you all very soon.